Hello everybody. We are going to be writing our notes today on the work of Gregor Mendel. So that will be your title, The Work of Gregor Mendel. I am just going to tell you his work because after this, on the left-hand side, you're going to develop a Facebook page for Gregor Mendel, and you're going to tell us, after you research him a little, what would he post? Tell about his life. Where did he work? Where did he study? Where was he born? Okay? You can freely draw a picture of him. Anyway, that is going to go on the left-hand side page. Right now, we're only going to focus on his work. Okay. So if we're going to understand Gregor Mendel, we need to know a few words. And we've already talked about this word, but we're going to define it again, and that is genetics. Many people say Gregor Mendel was the father of genetics. So what is genetics? Genetics is the scientific study of heredity. All right, well then that follows. We better know what heredity is. So let's put that down. Heredity. You've heard these words, but it really helps to have a definite definition. Okay. Heredity is the passing on of characteristics from parents to offspring. Offspring means children. And so another word we need to know is traits. What are traits? Well, they're characteristics. Characteristics. Sorry. Okay, so things like height, things like hair color, etc. All that stuff is your traits, your characteristics. They're passed on to you from your parents. And if you look at your grandma and grandpa, there's probably some characteristics or some traits that you carry from them as well. So let's just talk a little bit then about Gregor Mendel. Gregor Mendel. He was from Austria. That's the country near Germany and Switzerland. He was an Austrian monk who discovered important facts about heredity. There's our word. He used other things, but the main thing he used were garden peas. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and start highlighting as we do our vocabulary. And I'm going to underline these first three in blue. And then talking about the star of our show, I'm going to underline Gregor Mendel in red. History says that he also studied bees, but that didn't go over too well with the fellow monks up there in the mountains, as you can see why. So he eventually stuck with garden peas. They're easy to grow and breed and take those seeds and grow them again and study how parents pass on to offsprings. So let's talk about garden peas then. I'll stay here. What is it about garden peas? Besides the fact that bees stung people, why were garden peas a good thing for him to use? Well, garden peas, they do produce male and female sex cells in the flowers, right? We'll study more about that later, called gametes. And we'll study that later too. But if you remember, and I'm going to switch to green for the garden peas, okay? Gametes are the sex cells, like we talked about, the sperm and the egg. Those have only half of the required chromosomes for a species, so that when the mother and the dad's sex cells come together, you have the correct amount of chromosomes. So they're called gametes. And with garden peas, fertilization occurs when the male and female reproductive cells join. I'm just going to say the gametes. When the gametes join, forming a zygote, another vocabulary word, and it's not a goat. A zygote is right when the male and the female sex cells join together. Right then, you have the beginning of a new living thing. We call that a zygote. And you can just find a way to remember that. I think of a baby goat. Okay? And the cool thing about garden peas is the zygote becomes a seed. And so what Gregor Mendel would do is he'd take the pollen, that's the male, and he would put it on the pistil part, that's the female, and that would fertilize and make a seed. Then he could plant that seed and see the characteristics of that plant. That's how he did it. Okay, so now let's just write a little note about this. Mendel studied 7 different traits within the garden peas. And we'll just say of pea plants. Okay. And he only studied 1 trait at a time. 1 trait at a time. This was very scientific. This was using good scientific methods, so he could watch for 1 trait only. Then he didn't get too many control factors. So if he was studying height, he would just breed for height and look for short, for example, tall or short. And he kept very good notes, and that's what made him such a good scientist. And we still use his work today. Okay, so let's talk about another word. Now that we're talking about tall or short, that again would be a characteristic or a trait. So when we talk about our traits, our new word now is going to be hybrid. So I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to move to a new color. I'm going to move to pink. A hybrid, you've probably heard that. Like, my car's a hybrid. That means it runs on battery and gas. It means 2 different things. But when we're talking about Mendel's work, we're going to say that a hybrid is the offspring of parents that have different traits. Okay, so for example, tall, and we use an X when we say crossing, plus short will equal a hybrid. Okay, and we'll get into that more later. Okay, so if we're going to measure all these, and let me take a moment because I forgot to do our Cornell notes like I always do, and I'm so sorry. So we're going to put our line here, And we're going to leave 2 lines at the bottom. Here you're going to write possible test questions. Here you're going to write your conclusion, okay, later on the next day in class. Okay? So there's only 3 more vocabulary words that we want you to understand getting into the works of Gregor Mendel, okay? And that is, how do we label the generations, okay? So what we call the generations, we have a P1 generation. And that's the first, let's say he first started to take a short pea plant and a tall pea plant, and he took the pollen and he took the stamen, the pistil, and he put them together and made a seed. That seed would be a hybrid between a tall and short characteristics, right? Those parents we would call the P1 generation, okay? Those are the parents, okay? And then F1 generation, that would be the offspring. And remember, the other word for offspring, although we don't use this word when we talk about plants and things, but you think of it as children, right? The children are the offspring. And what Mendel did was then he took the children, and then when they grew up, he took the egg and the sperm from them, and he cross-pollinated the pea plants, and so he got the 3rd generation. You could think of this as like the grandchildren. We call the F2 generation the offspring of the F1 generation. And these are words that we're going to be using. So again, I'm going to highlight them for you. And I'm going to go back to blue. So we have P1, F1, and F2. Don't let this scare you. This just means the first time they crossed, and then they took the offspring and bred them, and then they took those offspring and bred them. P, F1, and F2. So I hope you have fun researching Mr. Mendel. He was a very brilliant man, and like I said, he used very good and exact science, so his work still remains today. Here's some example of a tall pea plant and a short pea plant, right? All the F1 generation was tall, and then the F2 generation, oh my goodness, 3 out of 4 were tall, and then every once in a while, the short one would show up again, okay? Another interesting thing just for you to know, Google honored Mr. Mendel on his birthday. That's what Google looked like. So anyway, look up Mendel on this next page, on the even side page. Make his Facebook page. Please include, what do you think he would post? Something about pea plants, maybe. Tell about his life. Where did he work? Where did he study? Where is he from? And that's how the next 2 pages in your journals will go. Okay.